I'm curious, when you all did your check-ins earlier, how many people, when they shared about what comes up for them with discipline, thought about joy? How many people, raise their hands, joy is associated with discipline for you? So I grew up with a very similar experience where discipline to me was just like carried with it a very negative charge. Probably part of it is growing up like in an Asian American household where it's like, do your homework, practice your piano, get good grades, all that kind of stuff. And I was just back in LA recently and was playing piano. And I naturally started with just playing a whole bunch of scales, which are like super boring. And that is the kind of shit that I hated. Like my mom would sit next to me and would force us to do the scales over and over and over again. And I hated it. It was so boring. But now I'm like, oh, I want to do this. I want to do this because I know the result that comes from actually practicing from that discipline. I imagine some of you who play sports or work out maybe can identify with that, right? There's this discipline of practice and training. And we did a little bit of that just now in our practice. So that was really alive for me when Mikey and I were talking about what we want to talk about. And then also, coincidentally, last weekend, I was facilitating a group and a personal trainer came up afterwards and he was talking about how he was trying to incorporate more mindfulness into his training because so many of his clients just say, I want to lose weight, I want to build muscle mass, and just go for it on a physical level. And they don't take care of what's actually going on inside to make it difficult for them to lose weight, to get stronger, to do what it is that they want to do. So he was trying to make it a more holistic journey. And my first question to him, I used to be a spinning instructor, like the type of spinning in the gym. I know it might be hard to imagine. And I used to like yell at people and like my motto was, you can rest when you're dead. And so the first thing that came up when I was talking to him was, well, how do you deal with that? Like you're trying to bring in more mindfulness into your work with your clients. How do you deal with this? Like, well, at some point you do kind of have to push, right? You have to push beyond your comfort level in order to get stronger, in order to make progress. And so we had this interesting conversation about it, and that also combined with the piano kind of like spurred, well, maybe it's time to talk about discipline in practice. So that's a little bit of what came to kind of inspire this conversation. And the unsaid part is that for my music and from the spinning as well, was like this immense sense of joy and freedom that comes when you actually get the scales, right? And when your fingers can do what you want them to do. And when your body can do what you want it to do. When your mind can do what you want it to do.
Yeah.
Say a little bit.
Yeah, just that this topic, through discipline comes joy. And it's kind of marketable. It sounds really nice. And so let's get into what we're going to cover tonight. It's kind of like the what, whys, and hows, right? What's the role of discipline in our spiritual practice? What it is and what it isn't. I know, like, I think the biggest difficulty we'll have is the push-up about what it is and what it isn't. And then I'll go over what the Buddha taught about this, on how to put proper discipline in our own meditation practice. So let's do it. Let's dig in.
Let's do it. So a lot of people, when they think about mindfulness and meditation, are like, oh, it's like, woo, it's like going to the spa. Like when I go on retreat, people are like, oh, that's going to be so nice. It's going to be so relaxing. You're going to the spa. And I'm like, yes, kind of. And it's hard. You're meeting your mind, and sometimes there's shit in there that you don't like. And so what do? You get up off the cushion when you find something in your mind that you don't like? No, you stay. You stay on this cushion. When I sit down for my daily practice, I set a timer, and I do not get up unless the house is burning down. And it's interesting because when I say, a lot of people think of meditation and mindfulness, it's just like, oh, just do whatever you want, it's relaxing. I always want to mention that in a lot of I'm going to call it non-convert sanghas, so let's call them heritage sanghas, like that came over from like the practices and communities that came over from Thailand and China and Japan. So the monastic communities that are still here, a lot of times they'll just be like, sit down, practice, don't think. Like they don't do like the more gentle, more like psychology-oriented language. So if you go sit with Thich Nhat Hanh's community or other Asian sanghas, monastic sanghas, a lot of it is a lot more straightforward. And there's pros and cons to that, of course. But sometimes it's really nice just to have that like straightforward, kind of like what we were doing today, like just keep it simple. What's that saying? Like keep it simple, stupid, right? Like just keep it simple so that you can have this container that creates safety, so that then you can explore. And there's an internal aspect of that as well as an external aspect of that. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So the Buddha basically said, I teach one thing, which is I teach suffering and the end of suffering. And you might know that he sat in meditation for a really long time, like for a stretch of 49 days, he sat under the Bodhi tree. And it's like, what? And he taught about freedom and joy? What? Isn't that just suffering? But actually, being able to understand what was going on in his own mind and creating this container saying, I'm just going to be still, allowed him to find what are the causes of suffering and how do I free myself from suffering. The Four Noble Truths, like Buddhism 101, that suffering part, what's the cause of suffering? And there's joy, there's a way out of it, and then here's the way. That's the fourth. And so this path is very much about that discipline of saying, let's do this. Like what you just said, let's do this. There's like an energy to it, right? Let's do it, let's commit to ourselves, and let's do this. When you think about it, there is work involved in awakening. There's work involved in unlearning our habits. There's work involved in letting go. It's not easy. It takes practice. And it's not easy because our tendency, our natural tendency, this is the second noble truth of what causes suffering. Our tendency is kind of to grasp and to cling onto things in either direction. I really, really want it, get it away from me. Right? And so it takes work to say, okay, I'm going to loosen. I'm going to unlearn the pattern that makes me cling, that makes me grasp. The Buddha liked to teach in lists, so there's a list of like hindrances to waking up, hindrances to practice. And there are things like that craving, that aversion, and also like sloth and torpor. I like saying that, it's just fun. Sloth and torpor, where you're kind of like this. And anxiety and restlessness, which is like too much. And then doubt. And so a lot of the mitigants to those involve some form of discipline. Like, okay, if it's sloth and torpor, like, wake yourself up. I may not want to wake up. It might feel kind of nice just to sit back. But there's an energy and there's a discipline to say, no, but I'm here for a reason. I'm here to wake up. I'm here to unlearn. I'm here to let go. So I'm going to allow myself to sit up, give myself that gift. At the start of every retreat, residential retreat in the Insight tradition, there's usually a teaching of the precepts, or known as the 5 precepts, and for monastics they have a lot more. So it's things like abstain from killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, intoxicants. What do those sound like? Sound familiar? Commandments, right? And this is where we get into what is discipline and what it's not. These precepts are not, thou shalt not kill, because somebody else told you not to. These precepts are meant, they're done at the beginning of every retreat to create this container of safety, internal and external, so that I don't have this hangover of having stepped on this ant or cockroach or whatever when I'm sitting on the cushion, so that I can freely practice, so that I can meet whatever's coming up without this guilt of lying to someone or whatever it might be, whatever I might have done to not abide by one of those precepts. And the other way it's different is that these precepts are practices. So actually Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master, in his tradition, he calls it the 5 mindfulness trainings. So they're not even commandments and not even precepts. And so it really is creating a container of safety. I have a really beautiful story about the external container of safety that creates. So before I moved to Nashville, I did a month-long silent retreat at Spirit Rock Meditation Center. And there was a BIPOC room. And it was a room just for people who identified as BIPOC. And we sat in there every day, if you wanted to, for one sitting period in silence. And then at the end of the retreat, the last day, we could talk again. And there was this woman who sat in the BIPOC room. I think she was 85. I found out this later. 85-year-old black woman. And we were going around sharing. And she said, thank you so much for creating a safe container so that my children could not have to be worried about getting shot and killed in this place for a month. It was so powerful. She didn't say, oh, it's because of the precepts and blah, blah, blah. But, we had all committed to those precepts to create this container of safety. Really fun ending to that story. I saw Fanny again this past New Year's, January, at Spirit Rock. And she was 85 then, so she was 81 at that retreat. And before we went into silence, I told her, I was like, I remember that thing that you said in the BIPOC room. She's like, oh my God, you remember that? And she's crying and I'm crying. It was just a really beautiful ending to that story. So it's important to understand these precepts. It's not, kind of like meditation, they're practices. So it's not a philosophy. It's not just like a way to relax. It's an actual practice. And think of like the posture that Mikey was talking about, strong back, soft front, soft heart. We need that strong back to allow our front to open and to soften and be open. Discipline and this practice of discipline also allows us to stay, not just in our practice, but off the cushion. To stay with difficult situations, to stay with an open heart. There's actually heart practices, the Brahma Viharas, that are concentration practices, discipline practices, where you're coming back over and over again. You're training yourself in kindness and love. And sometimes, a lot of times, that requires discipline to keep coming back, right? Coming back to that kindness, coming back. There's a Tibetan prayer that goes, grant that I may be given the appropriate difficulties and sufferings on this journey so that my heart may be truly awakened and that my practice of liberation and universal compassion may be truly fulfilled. Grant that I may be given the appropriate difficulties and sufferings. I don't know about you, but I need discipline to be able to deal with suffering in difficult situations. Otherwise, it's like, here's some difficulties, have fun. Take care of yourself. I need a practice for that. Okay, so what is it? What actually is discipline? I actually looked it up in the dictionary. I did not like any of the definitions, so I'm not going to talk about those. Very simply, to me, discipline is just 2 words. Coming back. That's it. That's it. And when it comes to practice, there are various layers of discipline, right? So first it's kind of those precepts that I was talking about, creating the container for safety, creating the conditions for practice. There's getting your butt to the cushion. That takes discipline. I don't want to sit today, I'm tired. No, just get my butt on the cushion. Within the practice, there's the discipline of coming back to the practice over and over again. It's amazing how easy it is to forget what I'm doing when I'm practicing, right? So it's the discipline to remember, oh, okay, I'm coming back to the breath. Oh, I'm coming back to kindness, I'm coming back to loving kindness. So there's the actual discipline in my mind to say, okay, I got to remember the practice and come back. Sometimes it takes discipline to be soft and kind in my practice. Right? If I'm really used to being hard on myself, then I have to be disciplined about noticing when I'm being hard on myself and saying, okay, maybe I can be soft. Soften, soften, soften. The Buddha actually taught with practice this kind of middle way of not too tight, not too loose. And he used the analogy of a lute, it's like this instrument they had, and one of his students couldn't get the sound right. It's like not too tight, not too loose. I also think about when I'm driving, I don't want to be gripping the wheel, but I also don't want to be totally relaxed. It's kind of like this middle way. Not too tight, not too loose. And especially with concentration practice, what we did earlier with the breath, this practice of coming back, that really builds a foundation for other practices. So concentration practice builds strength, stability, clarity of mind. And when you can build those three things in your practice, lay that foundation, lay that groundwork, then it opens the door to insight, opens the door maybe to feeling more relaxed with loving kindness, compassion, joy practice. It really preps the ground. And then so outside of practice, outside of formal practice, there's informal practice, like how I live my life when I'm off of the cushion. And there's discipline with that too. And that kind of comes back to the precepts, right? It's not just about not killing because you're about to sit down for a retreat. How do you feel when you've killed something, right? How do you feel when you've lied? It feels good to not do those things. And so in my informal practice, in my daily life, can I come back to those precepts? There's a word that can be loaded in Buddhist practice of just renunciation. And all that really means is, can I renunciate things that are harmful, that create harm for me and for others? Can I not indulge in the things that are unhelpful? And I feel like that's really easy to resonate with, right? How many times do you just keep eating the ice cream? And you're like, this is not helpful. Why am I doing it? Then take discipline to be I know I'm going to feel like shit. Stop. And then Mikey will talk a little bit more about wholesome and unwholesome mind states and how that plays into practice and informal practice as well. There's a great quote by Suzuki Roshi in the Zen tradition. He says, enlightenment is an accident. Practice makes us accident prone. So that speaks to not too tight, not too loose, right? Even with the concept of practice being oh, I need to have it, I need to practice, and pushing yourself to strive, there's that negative charge of disciplines. I must do this no matter what, and I'm going to beat myself up if I don't. Okay, but can we do it more out of aspiration because I want this for myself and for the world, rather than I have to do it because some external person or society told me that I have to do it? And it actually feels good. This practice, when I'm sitting on the cushion, when I have the discipline to come back, it feels like coming home. So the Sufi poet Rumi says, how often do you pay visits to yourself? And that's what I think about when I'm coming back to my breath. Coming home. Coming home. Aligning my mind and my body in the same place. It actually feels good. And it feels good specifically here. I've done this enough that I know that it feels the best right there. There's a story of a teacher, I don't even know who it is, maybe you know who it is. He says, I practice not so that I can become a good meditator, but so that on my walk from where I'm sleeping to the meditation hall, I can notice the wildflowers. So there's this beauty and this joy that comes from training the mind, and from stilling the mind, from simplifying. Do you understand that?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, what discipline is not, as I was saying earlier, it's not about applying external rules that somebody else gave you. It's about creating your own and listening to yourself. I like to think of the word aspirations rather than goals, because aspiration is something that is like inspirational. Maybe it's because the words sound alike. And by the way, the commonality is spiro, which is breathe, which is air. So aspirations, not goals. And when I think about like my fitness journey, when I was teaching spinning, how beautiful would it have been and practicing piano growing up, be like, oh, I'm not practicing because my teacher is going to get mad at me or because my mom's sitting next to me. But more my approach as an adult, which is, oh, because I like the way my fingers feel when I've practiced. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. Believe it or not, as an adult, when I stand in front of the mirror to brush my teeth, especially floss, I'm like, why do I have to do this? I still think this like almost every day. I'm like, why do I have to do this? And then the discipline comes in and it's like, yes, I have to do this. I had this whole, one of my best friends is a dentist. I had this whole negotiation with her about how many times a week I have to floss my teeth. It's 7 times a week, by the way. But also, okay, think about it with the brushing of the teeth, right? If there's like an appropriate level of discipline for me with that, if I miss a time of brushing my teeth, I'm not going to sit there beating myself up and telling myself stories about how I'm an awful person for missing a session of brushing my teeth, right? It's like, okay, shit, I missed brushing my teeth tonight, but it's not the end of the world. And so does discipline mean that I might have to do things that I don't want to, like brushing my teeth? Yeah, sometimes. But that comes from in here. That comes from my aspiration of having clean teeth. Right? So it's okay for me to do things sometimes that I don't want to because I know that it is serving my purpose, my overall purpose. And of course, I stay alive to, well, like, how does this feel? If it really actually feels wrong, then I adjust in the moment. But there's a bigger thing at play, which is my own aspiration. It's not coming from outside. And it's really important also to do this from a ground of care and compassion, right? If it's coming from my own aspiration, then what good is it to like beat myself up for not doing the thing that I wanted to do? So constantly remembering my intention and my aspiration. Same thing with when I sit and when I practice. Same thing when the hindrances come up. Sloth and torpor, restlessness, aversion, greed. Oh, why am I doing this? Okay, that makes sense. I want to do this. I want to do this. Even if it doesn't feel fantastic in this moment, I'm still going to sit my butt on this cushion until the timer goes off. And all of that brings joy because it's coming home. I know that it's relieving me from suffering. And this is why it's called practice. That's why it's not called going to the spa. It's called practice. With Thich Nhat Hanh again, I'll just end with this. He says, if your practice does not bring you joy, you're not practicing correctly. Simple as that.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you just said. And so thank you. It was very beautiful. I learned a lot. Especially, I learned that you floss 7 times a week. Whoa.
Every day.
Oh my gosh. But this synonym of discipline, come back, right? I love that. That the best things I ever done for myself is come back, right? That the best things I've ever done is to show up. I remember when I first started this practice, I was a punk rock kid, active in addiction, active in depression. I smelled like a bar. I was half drunk from the night before. And I'd walk into the meditation hall nervous. But I kept on showing up. I kept coming back to the meditation hall. And it did something for me. For one, it validated my suffering. You know, the Buddhist teaching starts with this term dukkha, dukkha. Inevitable in life, there is pain, there is suffering in life. And that was very helpful for me to know, to see clearly, we're all going through this, it's okay. But as I went further down in my practice, there was a certain point where I was coddling my suffering, that I was obsessed with my depression, obsessed with my self-hatred, obsessed with my shame. And I held it so tight. And I vividly remember meeting with one of my teachers, Dave Smith, and he says, you got to move forward, man. Like, we do this practice to be happy. And that may be strange, but I never considered being happy. I'd given up on happiness a long time ago because I was looking for happiness in all the wrong places. I got my heart stomped on by trying to find happiness in a career, trying to find happiness in playing music, trying to find happiness in other people and girls. And all these things are lovely in life, but they won't bring you genuine happiness. And then when I started looking at the core teachings of the Buddha, looking at the Eightfold Path, that is a path to happiness, no doubt. And where does happiness lie? It's in our minds. And so the sixth factor of the Eightfold Path is right effort. And what are the efforts we are making? It's the effort of happiness. And so there's 4 specific right efforts. The effort to prevent unwholesome thoughts, the effort to overcome unwholesome thoughts that are already in here, the effort to actively bring up wholesome thoughts, and the effort to maintain wholesome thoughts. And so we're in this wholesome versus unwholesome situation, right? And this word wholesome brings to mind me sitcoms, right? Like Family Matters and Full House, even the Brady Bunch, right? And at the end of the episode, there's always like some wholesome message. So get to the wholesome message of the mind, right? Things like kindness, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and finding ways to protect the mind, remove hatred, greed, and ignorance. And so while we put in these categories, there's a distinct difference between discernment and judgment, right? Discernment is, okay, I'm going to be very miserable if I keep on this train of self-hatred and shame and hating other people. That's not going to lead to anything good. So we need to discern that. But judgment is, I'm a bad person for thinking self-hating thoughts. I'm a bad person for having shame in the mind. It's okay if you have these thoughts in your mind. Literally, when you say it's okay that I have hatred in my mind, that is a wholesome thought. It is saying that's okay. It's okay. And so one of the practices, and Jennifer brought up the Brahma Viharas, the heart practices. One of the practices that was pivotal at this point when I decided, okay, I'm going to start this path of happiness, and that was loving kindness meditation. And in loving kindness meditation, many of you have practiced it, we purposely say phrases to ourselves and others as a way to create a habit. And the phrases I use are, may I be at ease, may I be at peace, may I be kind and gentle with myself, may I be filled with loving kindness. I just repeat that to myself to practice these 4 so-called right efforts. This first one, protecting the mind from unwholesome mind states. If I stay with that phrase, I'm protecting the mind from falling into the trap of resentment. And then, even when I say these phrases, may I be at ease, may I be at peace, even if my mind is stuck in the resentment and hatred, it starts removing it a little bit. I start discerning into ease and peace. And then I start developing that pattern. Whatever you practice, you get better at. The karma of the mind. And that's why we continually say these phrases, almost relentlessly. And when you know that this is actually how you find happiness, you want to do it more and more and more. And then what happens is you maintain that in every moment. So at this point in my life, when I was like, okay, it's happy time. I'm tired of being depressed. I was working at a restaurant. Some of you have heard this story before. I was working at a restaurant, and I was deep in my depression. Every day was like exhausting. So getting out of bed was just hard work, lifting this body up and just getting moving. So I would lift my body up and sit my ass on the cushion and start loving kindness meditation. And I'd do that 30 minutes in the morning, and then I'd go to work. And I was working at a restaurant. It was Sunflower Cafe. I guess I can give a shout out there. I love restaurant work. I kind of miss it. I definitely miss it. And so I started, and I was doing prep, right? 9 a.m. prep time. And so I was cutting tomatoes. May I be at ease, may I be at ease, may I be at ease, to protect my mind from any thoughts that lead to depression. And I was cutting onions. May I be at peace, may I be at peace. Cutting salads. May I be kind and gentle with myself. Cutting the vegetables for the dips, right? May I be filled with loving kindness. And then at 11 a.m. when the restaurant opened, I switched to the front of house. And then people started coming in through the door. 11 a.m., flipping the sign. People are coming in. Where do you think my mind went? And you don't work in restaurants? Oh man, get out of here. Can't you just wait a second? Oh, these fucking people, they're bothering me. And if I follow that unwholesome thought, I would shut down in depression and want to go home and end my shift, back into exhaustion. So I knew from 11 to 12, any person that walked in through that door, if I thought, may you be at ease, may you be at ease, just silently within my mind, it protected my mind from unwholesome mind states that would trigger my depression and have me shut down. So for the first hour, may you be at ease, may you be at ease, may you be at ease to every single person. And then the second hour, okay, time to wish peace. May you be at peace, may you be at peace, may you be at peace. Because I'm already protecting my mind, now I'm cultivating peace. And now I want to keep it going. The next hour, may you be kind and gentle with yourself. May you be kind and gentle with yourself. And then the final hour of work, I got through it. Made it through the whole shift without dipping out. May all y'all be filled with loving kindness. Now I'm feeling it and energized. And so this is very practical work. Those thoughts, hatred, ridiculing other people with your mind, ridiculing yourself with your mind, try not to do that. Try to move over to a mind state that works and make that effort and discipline. Keep an eye on your mind because it dictates your happiness or suffering. And so right now, look around the room. Maybe make eye contact with someone. And just think this. May you be at ease. May you be at ease. And as any thoughts, no, keep going, keep going. As any thoughts of, oh, this is weird, or oh, do I look okay? Protect your mind from any of those self-judgments, looking at each other, still doing it, please. May you be at ease. Wish people ease. There you go. Let it land. And if it ever lands, stick with it. May you be at ease. May you be at ease. Because this is the true discipline that leads to joy. This is real joy. Spiritual joy. One that comes from within. My teacher at that same time, it was kind of odd. When I started dedicating myself to happiness, another teacher of mine, the Venerable Panyawati, I started coming in contact with her. And she started teaching me about spiritual happiness. She says, there's a happiness not born of this world. Therefore, the world can't take it away from you. And so when we find that happiness within, it's unstoppable. As pain arises, we have the happiness within to meet anything painful with compassion and care. Oh, I love you no matter what. I know this life can be disappointing sometimes, and I'm still going to love you, right? And meeting the pleasure of life with non-attached appreciation. Oh, this is awesome. What a wonderful moment spending time with friends. This is great, and we fully embrace it with this internal happiness without clinging on. So there is a happiness not born of this world, and it's in this heart. So take care of your heart. keep that discipline. Come back over and over again. All right? So anything else before we open it up?
Yeah, something did come to me, but then it left. Oh, now I remember. Fake it till you make it. I'm a big believer in fake it till you make it, especially when it comes to practice. Get your butt on the cushion, practice loving kindness, do the phrases, even if you're not really feeling it, it's okay. Just fake it till you make it.